All right. Thanks, Chris, and thanks for having me here. Can everyone hear me okay? Oh, whoa. Okay. So today I'm going to talk about a type of data we're all very familiar with, and I think most of us like intrinsically, and that's geographic data, and particularly imagery of the Earth. And we've already seen some examples of that today. And I'm going to start with a little show and tell here, which is I had to bring a prop. I couldn't resist. My old Macintosh PowerBook 145 from 1992. It came with, this was the first computer I had with a hard drive. It came with actually about 6 megabytes of memory. That was a big, big deal. And I was just blown away. I couldn't believe I had that much memory. I'm just putting this back here. I couldn't believe I had that much memory at my fingertips. Today, we now all have computers. I can go down to Staples and buy a computer that has 250,000 times more memory than that for about $400, $600, something like that. Times have changed, and that's 20 years ago. And as a result, with all this increased computing power, we are drowning in data. We're just absolutely drowning in data. And one of the types of data that we are most drowning in is remote sensing or imagery data, satellite data, aerial data, things like that. And we've all played around with this, I'm sure. We all love Google Earth. It's free and it's fun. And it's just teeming with imagery. And so what do we do with all this stuff? How do we make use of this? Here's an image of Baltimore. This is urban Baltimore. It's got all these great objects in there. I can look at there and see. It's a little hard to see with this projector, but I can see trees and buildings and things like that. And let's just say, though, I wanted to actually do some kind of a quantitative study with that. Say I had to do something that required knowing where the trees really were. Well, I can see where the trees are. I know where they are, but the computer doesn't know. It has no clue what a tree is. Let's just say I wanted to do something like, these are actually the locations of crimes. Say I wanted to know if the density of trees affects crime, right? There's no way I could do that with imagery the way we have it now in a computing environment. And part of the reason for this is that computers aren't really good at recognizing things the way that we can recognize things. We are excellent at recognizing things with very, very slight differences. We can distinguish. I can tell you within 2 seconds that that's George Carlin and that's Sigmund Freud, that is The Big Lebowski and that's Eddie Vedder. For me to train a computer to recognize the difference between The Big Lebowski, AKA the dude, and Eddie Vedder would take me unbelievable amounts of time to do. Yet I can do that instantly. So that's an issue right here. So let's cut to the chase here. On the left, I have raw data. I've got a color infrared remote sense imagery. On the right, I have a classified GIS layer. That's information. That's usable information. The computer knows what's grass. It knows what's buildings. It knows what's trees, et cetera, like that. How do I get from one to the other? This is a major, major conundrum in today's world of high-resolution data. Here's an image of just a typical suburban area. I look at it and I see all sorts of features, and I see that it's at a very fine resolution. If I were to be working with remote sensing data, say 15 years ago, I'd have coarse resolution imagery. This is the same exact location using 30-meter pixels. And back then, classifying this stuff was a lot different, qualitatively different sort of thing, because all I really needed to do is get in the general ballpark. These pixels here are sort of generally urbanized. These pixels over here are sort of generally forested. I didn't really have to know about the specific identity of objects. Now fast forward to today, and I've got imagery which I can zoom in, and I can see objects that, a million different types of object, from cars in a parking lot to shipping containers, right? To the cranes at the shipping container facility, to the mechanicals on top of a building, to, I love this one, this is the Sphinx at the Luxor Hotel in Las Vegas. Try telling a computer what that is. Here's another Vegas one. I love Google Earth in Vegas. It's the best. It's so much fun. This is a tropical fish-shaped pool. Again, not so easy to tell a computer what that is. And this is the best of all. This is actually, I believe this is high-resolution satellite imagery, and it's of camels in the middle of Africa. It's part of this Google National Geographic African mega flyover project. And so the number of possible things I have to prepare computers for, to be ready for, the types of objects out on the surface of the Earth is staggering. And it's a project that we'll never see that finished, that project of teaching computers the artificial intelligence, giving them the artificial intelligence they need to recognize all of this variation on the Earth. Yet, oh, and here's another even better one. This is actually a real thing. This is the kernel. Someone actually did mega art of the kernel in the middle of Nevada. It's interesting how many of these come from Nevada. So let's explain why this is why it's difficult to use the methods we've always used in the past for this generation of high-resolution imagery. Here is a high-resolution image of Burlington. If I turn it into if I try to classify each pixel, pixel by pixel, I get this awful pixelated, meaningless gobbledygook. If I look at a particular object, like a house, that house is made up, it's hard to see, but just dozens of different pixel values that don't really mean anything. If I take this single tree, again, it's made up of sort of gobbledygook of pixels. Now, if I zoom in on that tree, for instance, I will see that it's made up of pixels with lots of different tones, different colors. And if this is the direct representation in classified pixels, it's meaningless, right? It's not finding objects. So I need to teach a computer to see objects and to think like me. So this means teaching a computer to think like a human, which means working based on shape, size, tone, pattern, texture, sight, and association. A lot of this is all spatial. We have to now stop thinking pixel by pixel and start thinking of things spatially. That means taking an image and what's called segmenting it, turning it into objects. And the process of segmenting it is very difficult. You have to train a computer to segment correctly, to segment imagery correctly. And if I look, here's a house. There's one side of the roof and another side of the roof. There's the driveway. They're segmented as different objects, and I can eventually re-aggregate those objects into something that is just a house and another one that's just a driveway. And at the end of the day, what I'm going to end up with is something like this. I will be able to tell you the difference, even though the spectral signature is exactly the same of this roof and this road. I know that their compactness factor is different. And because of that, because of the shape metrics of them, I can tell you which one's a roof and which one's a road. And I can start classifying things in that way. And to do this requires huge rule sets. The rule sets can be dozens and dozens to over 100 pages long of all these classification rules. And I won't bore you with the details. And I also will make use of a lot of ancillary data. There's all sorts of great GIS data that helps me classify things now. Most cities are collecting things about building footprints. We know where parcels are. We know where sewer lines and roads are and things like that. We can use this to help us. But the most important form of ancillary data that's out there today is called LiDAR, light detection and ranging. And LiDAR been used in engineering for a while, and it allows us to essentially create models of the surface. This is Columbus Circle in Central Park in New York City. And this is a surface elevation of the trees. The LiDAR tells me where the canopy of the trees is. It tells me where the tops of the buildings are. It tells me where the ground surface is, too. And I can create these incredibly detailed models of the world. So now I'm not just working with spectral information, reflectance information. I'm also working with height information. I know the heights of things. So I can see two objects that are green and woody, but I can tell that one of them is a shrub and one of them is a tree. And this is just zooming into that stuff there. Now, the problem is this is incredibly data intensive, and nobody's figured out up until very, very recently, and I mean like maybe 2 years ago, people were doing this on a tile-by-tile basis. You work on one little tile of data at a time that might be, just that red outline you see right there. And that might be, half a gigabyte or something like that. So we've worked on turning this into an enterprise environment. That's what we have to do, make an enterprise environment out of this so we can start looking at thousands of tiles of data at a time, and we've successfully done that at my lab, which is the Spatial Analysis Labs. The Spatial Analysis Lab is the lab I run, and they've been doing this stuff for a number of years, and they've collected, through 64 projects, 837 communities covering 28 million people, almost 9,000 square miles of data mapped, 250 billion pixels of land cover products generated, and 110 terabytes of data. So this is a major undertaking, but it's only the beginning. Going back to the crime data that I was telling you about, those trees. So here's Baltimore again. Using this method, we turn data into information. We get trees. We now know where the trees are. I overlay it with the crime. I end up with information now. I can now do a study, and we just submitted this for publication. We found out that, in fact, there's a strong, strong negative correlation between trees and crime, even when you adjust for about 50 other things. We couldn't have done that without this sort of information. So with that, I will say thanks to the people from the Spatial Analysis Lab, and particularly Jarlath O'Neill Dunn, who helped me put this together and who've been doing this research for a long time, and thanks to you. Thank you.